All right. Good morning, people, or good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're at. This is Jason Straight. I'm here today with Jody Roberts, the other leader of the Cloud VC, and Steve Hughes, who will be doing our presentation here today. I'm just going to go through some quick community news before we hand it over to Steve. Let's see here. There we go. If you like what you see here and you want to see what other chapters and other information that's available through PASS that you can get through for some free training, there are a number of other virtual chapters that are out there. There's virtual memory. Not virtual memory. In memory. There we go. There's global Spanish. There's an Excel. There's global Chinese, business intelligence. Really, whatever you're looking for, there is a lot of content out there. Last year, the Spanish global virtual chapter, I think that they were doing like 2 or 3 presentations every single week, and those are all Spanish-only presentations. So, these presentations aren't coming only in English. There are a lot of other ways that you can consume this and get into your get stuff in your native language. There are SQL Saturdays coming up. It's a little bit late in the month, so if you were looking for Richmond, it's a little bit too late. But we've got Silicon Valley, Madison, Huntington Beach, Boston, Ottawa. Those are all coming up in North America, and a number coming up in international, Costa Rica or Joinville or Exeter. So if you're looking for a SQL Saturday, which is just a day full of free training, go ahead and check that out at SQLSaturday.com. And you'll probably notice with SQLSaturday.com here in the next week or two that it is going to go through a significant facelift. So check that out. Our upcoming meetings, we don't have a very long queue of upcoming meetings. We do have on the 27th, we'll have Joey D'Antoni coming through to talk about SQL Server DR in Microsoft Azure. So that'll be a good one. The ways that you can keep your environment going when a Sharknado hits your data center. That's coming up on the 27th. If you want to get to that registration link, just go to TinyCC Cloud VC 0427. As I mentioned, we don't have a lot of presentations in the queue. We managed to generally get somebody that volunteers, like Steve here, towards the last minute, but we want to get more of a cadence going. So if you are available for the 8th, the 13th of May, or the 25th of May at 12 p.m. Eastern, this same time, please reach out to us at cloudvc@sqlpass.org, and we'd be glad to get you scheduled. Really, if you've got anything, whether it's Azure, whether it is AWS, that you want to talk about when it comes to how you can put your data systems together and data architecture, please let us know, and we will get you out on the calendar. If you want to go later than that in the year, we have lots of free space out there as well. If you weren't aware of what our schedule is, we meet on the second Wednesday and the 4th Monday of the month, kind of changing it up to make sure people have the best available opportunities to present and get information. PASS Summit is coming up here, so PASS Summit takes a lot of hard work to get it put together, to keep it part of a community-driven organization. We do need volunteers, so if you're looking just to volunteer, you can go to volunteer.sqlpass.org and let PASS know how you want to volunteer, whether you want to volunteer for the summit that's coming up or with virtual chapters like Jody and I do, or if you want to help out with local user groups. Going there is a great way to find opportunities for doing that. With that, I am going to pass things over to Steve here. Steve Hughes is a consultant with PragmaticWorks, who I haven't actually worked with him for a really long time because he just came on over to PragmaticWorks, but I've known him for quite a number of years, and he's a pretty sharp guy. So I'm going to turn things over to him and let him give a little bit of a background on himself and get started here with Introduction to Data Factory. It's all yours, Steve.
All right. I'll go ahead and get my screen showing here, and then make sure we're all good to go in visuals. Make sure you're in the right screen, hopefully.
Yeah, you're showing the PowerPoint.
Yeah. but probably not the full screen view, right?
That
There we go.
is correct.
Yeah, the normal presenter problem here. Let me switch that over, and then, of course, I'm not using presenter view. Let's see here. And I know what I got to do. While I'm fixing this, just as Jason said, I've been joined Paramedic Works just recently. Well, not real recently. I guess it's almost 6 months in now. I've been doing SQL and data work for quite some time, and sorry, I'm trying to get through here. There we go. Now this will show the right way. And my interest in Azure and cloud and data are very interrelated. I helped work on a software as a service company about, I want to say 7, 8 years ago, and right when Salesforce was becoming strong, and learned a lot about virtualized data and virtualized systems and data and trying to get all that stuff handled. So Azure has a special place for me as it was being released shortly after I tried to solve a lot of problems that it did. And in this case, I do a lot of BI and spend a lot of time in Excel these days because that's where Microsoft invested a lot of their BI efforts. But that gives you kind of a little bit of a background around what I've done. What I'm presenting today is this is a preview, so you're warned. And some of my demos, hopefully all the demos go the way they're supposed to go. That's how it's supposed to be, right? But it's still a preview where we talk about Data Factory, which is, well, we'll dig into that as we go on here. So, there's a little bit about me. I'm also known as Data on Wheels. I've been using that brand for quite a while, so you can track me down with a variety. Actually, if you just search it, I'm sure you'll track me down. There's some of my contact information. I will leave that up at the end as well, so that you can actually check it out and get to me from there as well. So let's start with what Data Factory is. I love terms like cloud-based, highly scalable, things that we all really wish they put more definition around of what that means. But Data Factory is, first of all, I say it's really not SSIS. It is about moving data, and it's about moving and transforming data, but the whole process is a little bit different than ETL. ETL we work in we're thinking large-scale batch style, where in this case we're really trying to move smaller chunks of data as fast as possible throughout the environment. As the tool has been built over time here, and its focus has been what's in Azure. So I find it interesting that machine learning, recently released, was also just added to Data Factory as a, with this batch API capability to actually go and do some batch measurement. Hadoop is also you can do Hive, and we'll talk about some of the activities that are supported there as they continue to increase those as well. And then the thing is, and then it works with SQL Azure Database, but it will work with your on-premise SQL Server databases as well. The idea is to move data through the concept of pipelines moving from basically table structure to table structure in some way, shape, or form. So it interacts with SQL Azure Database, it interacts with the Azure storage mechanisms like blob storage and table storage, SQL on-prem, HD Insight, Azure Machine Learning, and that's the basics of where it's at today. A little bit about the components before we dig into, because we'll build one of these as a demo, so I want to walk through kind of the pieces that really make up the Data Factory. In this case, we have the link servers, which really are your targets. So what are you actually, what servers, it's all the connection information gets stored here. Realistically, not a whole lot different than a connection library, but it is saying these are the servers we're actually going to connect to, or the types of storage we're going to connect to. Because really, if you think about HD Insight, it's not really necessarily a server per se, but you are targeting content in that way. Data sets, if you've done .NET development, these are not the same, just so we're all clear. And the data sets are basically JSON files that give input and output instructions. They basically take whatever the content is and whatever the source and destination and frames it up and says this is what we expect to see. These are the data types that we're using and how, this beginning and end of where things will go. The pipelines themselves are the activities that are supported, and they're support standard SQL type activities, and even let's dig into those. Here's some of the activities that are currently supported. Realistically, the copy activity is exactly what it sounds: a batch copy from a source to a sink, not a destination. Don't know why it's not a destination, but I'm sure there's a good reason. But you're basically going to be targeting the working with the source and then targeting a destination with a copy. It really just is for copying. There's no additional transformation that happens. HD Insight activity, it supports the pig, hive, and map reduce transformations. These, you basically build an activity that allows for that type of movement and work within the hive and pulling data in and out of maybe blob storage and so on. The machine learning scoring activity, this one was interesting. I haven't had a chance to actually play with this one yet. This will basically allow you to take data. So like if you're looking at log data or maybe some survey information comes in a text format and you're dumping it into your blob storage and you want to consume that and you want to score it before you move it to the next level, you can actually do it, score it, restate the data as scored data, and then use that as a source into a SQL Azure database or some other platform that actually will work to consume that data. Store procedure activities were added last month, so these are fairly new as well. They basically allow you to execute procedures in a SQL Azure database or an Azure SQL database. The thing about this is I was looking at the moment, it doesn't appear that this works with on-premise, but I haven't found the reason why not yet, but it did not appear to work that way. Finally, you have the ability to create custom activities. So if you're doing some custom, if you want to do C# or .NET, you can actually create your own activities, which goes to kind of what Microsoft does a lot of, which is continuing to allow us to extend the platform to meet our specific needs. So your limitation at this point will be the limitation of the supported servers, not necessarily the supported type of activities. So you can do a lot of custom work in .NET, but you're going to have to be cognizant of your data sets that you can create as well as the servers that you're able to use. Okay, so let's get started. I'm actually moving in. The first round I'll show you is one that's already been built, and I'm just going to walk you through some of the pieces of what Data Factory is. So this is the new portal. If you haven't seen the new portal, I encourage you to use it. Obviously, they're headed this way. Ironically, it's still in preview. So if I go out to my home page on this one, I can actually see that I tagged SU's Data Factory. So this is my Data Factory as set up at the moment. Now, in my Data Factory, goes through and plugs everything in. I have 3 data sets that I'm working with, one pipeline, I have another pipeline we'll add, and some 3 linked servers. I do have the metrics turned on, and it's looking for alerts and movement at the moment. So a little bit of a walk around on the blade that we're looking at here. Author and deploy is a shortcut to all the JSON authoring. One of the things I had noted in my slide deck was that you'd actually author and deploy via PowerShell. You can now actually author directly in in the portal. So for instance, if I wanted to do a draft, I could actually create a new pipeline. If I want to create a new pipeline, we'll walk through some of that here in a minute. Let's go back to the tour here. You can also get a diagram. This, well, my diagram, it's not very compelling at the moment because it's only got a couple pieces. This is something to be aware of. It shows it gives you kind of a workflow of what happens and all the pieces that are going. So in this case, you can see that I'm actually moving from blob storage through my pipeline, which is a copy activity, into the SQL database. And move this guy. There we go. The overall properties basically just gives you the subscription information. Datasets gives you a list of datasets that are actively working, and you can get into properties and editing of each one of those. Pipeline's the same kind of thing. So here you can see it'll give me the pipeline properties and say, all right, this pipeline has been deployed, it's actively running, it's doing a copy activity, so it knows what it's doing in all those pieces and what's being consumed and what's being produced. And this linked servers, It actually lists out the data stores, data gateways. That's how you would actually get to your you'd actually get to off-premise, and then compute would be HD Insight and machine learning types. So as you go into here, you can actually get an idea of what you can do. So if we were creating a new data gateway, this would be Cloud VC, and then we go to say OK on that. And, oh, I was doing a gate. I don't want to do a gateway. That's on premise. I actually want to do compute. All right. Yeah, compute's not right there for me. So, so that gives you something that that demo didn't go as expected. So link servers, services. I keep saying servers because I've been doing this for too long. But you can actually plug into a variety of data types here: file system, SQL Server, Azure SQL Database, and so on. All right. So I'm actually using a text file for my source. I'm going to go ahead and throw that out here. Let me grab my Azure Storage Explorer. So right now on my blob storage, I actually have a movie.txt file, and basically it's a fairly simple file that we can actually, just got a few movies in it in this type of format here. You can see it's basically the movie title, the studio you released, and so on. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of the header because I don't need it anymore. Save that content. Yep, update that for me. And now I've got this text file sitting out here in my storage container. So as I go in here, if I go to look at that, it's actually in the same storage container here, which is my blob files, and it just tells me where it's located in the properties. Then we go to data sets. This is where it gets interesting, and we actually can see in our data sets that I had to define what the type of storage was, what the layout of the data is, and it's really easily seen in the table schema. So it knows I have 3 fields coming over called movie title, studio, and year released. The data types are listed, and the table source is actually the JSON file that's used to create this. So we're going to walk through now from top to bottom in this view. The pieces that you would build out and how you would add things in here. So this is actually the, if we go back, when I talked about author and deploy, you're able to actually get to this right away. It's a shortcut to all of the things. And you can see here we have our link services, data sets, and the pipelines are all here. So if I wanted to create a new, let's create a new database. There's a couple ways to go about doing this. The easiest one is to, we can go ahead and add a new data store and say I want to add an Azure SQL database. It gives you the format of how to do that. So in this case here, it just goes on for a while. I'll go ahead and throw a carriage trim here so you can see it. I just broke it, but you get the idea here that we actually get the server name, which is the database.windows.net. Then we can go in and pull in our user ID, server, and password. So let's look at a completed one, like media database. It automatically hides your password. So in demos, I can demo this safely. But it gets, so like in this case, there's my data sources, the windows.net, catalog, media library, and the user ID and password are there, and then the hub name, which is the hub I'm currently working in, and the type of service that it is. The blob files are similar. We can actually see that this actually pulls in our account key, so you actually pull out your storage account key, and once again it's hidden, so you can actually not talk about it here, but it's not something that's easily exposed, and we can edit it. When you actually create a new one in this fashion, you notice how it was doing it with text. But you can actually do that easier from, that's fine, from here by going into link servers and like we were showing before and using the blade methodology and say create a new one and go through this process and enter everything in. It will generate the file that you saw and that are the JSON that you saw that was created there. All right. So once you have your linked services created, the next step is to create data sets. The data sets are actually the table definitions that are being used for what you're doing. So as we pointed out in the first one, our blob storage, if we walk through what's in this file, the key parts here, you're going to provide a name for it, and it'll need to be unique within your list of data sets. And as you build it out, you're going to build out the different sets of properties that are listed. So first of all, we'll look at structure. Structure stays the same across them all. So like this case, we can see a movie title, the data type that's there, the string, and then also end. The position I didn't actually add in initially. When I initially created it, I'll show you what it looked like. When I initially created this, it was actually did not contain the position thing. So it's some pieces it'll add in automatically, like anything when you go to add that. Let's see, movies from. I'll grab the right JSON file. So in this case, if I were to create a new data set, and this one would be in Azure Blob Storage again, you can see in the template it gives you all that information as well, lets you know some of the help. There's really good support on the JSON documentation, but having it here is also helpful. So if I actually, oops, let's try that again. Get rid of this and paste in, this is a generic, as you can probably get it. So if I actually go and say, hey, make this number 3, and you'll notice it drops it immediately down to draft, and it will give me an error because my current copy interval is too short, but that's all right. So this is how I would create it initially, because it's a lot easier to lay out and easier to read. So when I created my first round of this, I actually built the structure out just like you see it. Then you define the location. In this case is an Azure Blob location. The Azure, the other locations had different names, and you put the folder path in here. And let's see. So in this case, I don't actually have subfolders in mine, but I do have, this is my container name. Then the format is text. The delimiter is comma. You can actually, if you're using specific text delimiters, you can use those as well as end of line. So it's additional pieces, which we could see if you go back into, create another draft real quick. You can actually see here that they have more options in the formatting. So you can handle the row delimiter, the escape character, and the null value if you need to support those in your text files. So to go back to this, my link service name, which I think is not that anymore. No, it is blob files. And then so on. So the availability, this is what's going to set up how often it creates a slice of data. And if you don't specify any availability or any interval, it will actually do it for once an hour. So my goal is to actually do it once every 10 minutes and to have it actually, create slices that would be available to us. So that was ideal. However, when we go to upload this, we'll get an error because it's saying that we need to, it only does within 15-minute increments. So that's something to be aware of. The lowest level of incrementation you can do is 15 minutes. It does support minute, hour, day, and I believe week as well. So I'm going here, make a quick edit. And there's really not a save concept here. So there's not a save button, but I can either, make a copy of it or clone it, discard the whole thing, or deploy it. So once I've deployed it, it's essentially saved. We'll see it show up on our data set list as movies from Blob 3, and I now have another data set available to me. I didn't need to create another link service. It's using the same service for the data set in question. We look at the SQL DB here. So this is targeting a SQL Azure database. And once again, you have your structure laid out, so we'll do the same thing. My structure would look the same that we saw in the blob storage that I copied in before it tweaks it and fixes it the way it likes to look at it. The location changes from instead of Azure Blob location to Azure SQL. I give it a table name, and the link service name is media database in this case, and once again, set the intervals. Excuse me. So this is another data set we're looking at. It's built the same way, it's just pointing to a different SQL database. So let's have a look. Excuse me, everybody. So I'm going to make sure I'm on track with what I had, because I kind of walked you through the pieces that we have before I go and create a new one here. Oh, I missed a slideshow. Hold on. So that's the data that we're moving. And next demo is to completely build the factory. So we're going to actually create a brand new factory, build all the pieces out. I won't try to type the JSON. I'll just copy and paste it in. And we'll set the active period for this. Now, one of the things that dramatically changed and has made this a lot simpler is we no longer need to actually use PowerShell to do this, but this can completely be done in PowerShell. I'm not a huge, don't get PowerShell very well all the time, but there's one activity that we have to use PowerShell for, so we'll use it in that scenario, and I'll walk you through it. The big thing is you have to set up to use what's it called? The Azure, you're using Azure Resource Groups, I believe it is, a Resource Manager. So when you go to Azure, you'll go to to PowerShell, use the Azure Resource Manager. So we'll walk through that as we set up for the setting the active period for the pipeline. So let's do this. Let's walk through a complete create real quick so you get an idea of what we're doing, and then go from there. So if we go back to my home page, and we're actually going to go add new. And this is going to be data analytics. You see here, data factory still in previews at notes there. We're going to create a really sophisticated one. It's going to be use 2 data factory. We're going to throw this into my resource group. So let's see here. And resource groups are just a way to bundle all these pieces together, so that's what we're doing in this case. Region name, I think we're good to go there. I think those are the only places you can actually put it. So we're going to go and throw that in 2. It's going to create the data factory, and that's really all it takes to create the factory. And depending how long this takes will determine whether or not I stay there, and I probably am not going to. Because we all know that Azure can sometimes be really fast and sometimes not so fast. So let's go back to the one I've already created. We'll let that just roll. You saw what we were doing. So when you would have come into here, we would have actually had no data sets, no link servers, services, or any of that sort of thing. So we already have created the link services, so I'm not going to go through that process again. Showed you how to create those. And then the data sets, we actually have 4 data sets right now. The 2 from blob storage that we had, and then SQL and the other SQL, the old SQL as I call it. They're 2 different servers actually. So those are ready to go. So let's look at the movies pipeline I have created, then we're going to create a different pipeline as well. So this pipeline actually moves data from the blob storage over to my SQL database. And you can see here it's set up to be running, and then we actually have the one copy activity. So if we go to the copy activity, it's going to say, well, here's what you're doing. We go to activity script. Oh, sorry, that's not what I wanted to do. Pipeline source is what we're after here. And you see it opens up, once again, our editing window for that. So let's walk through the copy activity pipeline as we have it set up right now. So this right now is, you're going to call out the activity. You can have more than one activity in your pipeline. In this case, we only have one. We're going to do a copy activity. We're going to do the transformation that we're doing is basically copying one from source to destination. So we're going to do, our source is a blob source, and our sink is a SQL sink, so it's a target for SQL Server. They have a blob sink, which is we create a file essentially inside your blob storage, for instance. My inputs are the data set that I've created called Movies from Blob 2. So keep in mind that data set has a definition for the columns that we're dealing with. And my output is movies to SQLDB, so the new targeted database that we're looking to copy into. And then the policy gets added if these are all the defaults for the policy, if you do not send something out, because I actually didn't. And then give it a name, and then what its description is for the activity that you're doing. The other piece that has to be set is the start and end date, so we'll create a new pipeline and then we'll set that activity up. But I just wanted you to be aware that that doesn't, you can add that in here manually as well, but it doesn't show up in the options that are readily available. So let's actually create a new pipeline. So in this case, the template really doesn't have much in it. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to copy from SQL Server to SQL Server, two different instances of SQL Azure. In this case, grab my file. Oh, that's the wrong file. There we go. And the reason I want to show this is because I want to show something that's a little different than what we saw in the standard copy. So this one's targeting between the two SQL databases. Another simple copy transform, not doing a lot of heavy lift here. So we're going to pull from the old database into the new one. My transformation is my source is SQL source, and I'm using a SQL reader query in this case. So now I'm pulling the movie name, the studio, and the year release from DBO Movies, which is the table that's in my existing database, which if I pull that up, we want to, unless I think I have movies here. Let's see here. Switch my connection. Do a new query here. So we never type in demos. So execute this, and so you can see we have just a few movies listed here, 5 movies that we have. Movie name, studio, and year release. I'm not pulling the ID in this scenario, so we'll let the ID auto increment on the destination. So we're basically pulling the same query, and then we're going to do a SQL sync into the destination. So basically we're going to go right to the SQL. And you'll notice in this case we don't have any timing. So if you recall, if you look at this one here, we actually have a start and end. So we'll use PowerShell to upload the timing so you can see some of the PowerShell stuff that you can do with this as well. All right. So we're going to go ahead and say this is great. We're going to go ahead and publish this. My pipeline's deployed successfully. We're going to close this down and close this. Go back to kind of the good old blade shutdown. Did I not rename it? How about I use the same name and overwrote it? Nope, got 2. Make sure it went out, said it went out successfully. Let's try that again. All right, close this down again. There we go, now it's there. So now I get 2 pipelines in place. Now, in order to set the time, I'm going to open up Azure PowerShell window. And we're going to walk through this. So in this case, in PowerShell, so this is an Azure PowerShell window, so you need to make sure you're using that PowerShell window when you're doing the work. So we need to switch the mode that we're working in. So we're going to switch it to the Azure mode. I promise not to type the whole thing out for the rest of this. This is the one part I didn't have ready to copy. So now it's doing all its work to get us access to the resource manager. Let's get this so you can see it easier on the screen. So the next piece up is we actually want to set the timing. And grab the code for that, like I said, so you don't have to actually see me type all that. So here's what we have here. Paste didn't work the way I wanted it to. So you can see right here we're doing the Azure Active Directory or Azure Data Factory Pipeline active period. Among other things that are available for this is you can actually deploy your JSON files. So you'd actually put your JSON files out and target them, so you can actually deploy all the components, the tables, the pipeline. Any of this can be targeted with PowerShell. So I gave it my resource group name, the data factory name, and there's what we want to change is the start date time. So I actually want this to be starting yesterday. It does show up in UTC time, so you have to specify that. That's why I'm going to go ahead and go backwards and forwards here. So we're going to go with 325. And I need to change my pipeline name to DB. So this right here will actually set the start and end time. What that matters for is that we actually need to be able to, I don't want it missing there. You need to be able to specify how long you want the pipeline to run. And you can actually, like something like we're running every 10 minutes, we only want this to actually run for a couple days at most, basically for demo purposes, just to get us where we need to be. You can actually specify these times throughout, and if you actually schedule your scripting, you can turn this on and off. So the pipeline's only active during times when you actually want to use it. So that's the advantage of using PowerShell and doing scheduling. So we're going to go ahead and do this. And of course, let's see here. It would have been too easy if it would work right away, so we're going to set this timeline up a little bit later. Make this 326. And make this one 27, and this should work. There we go. So we can't run the pipeline schedule across both activities at the same time. I think it's because I'm targeting the same database. So yeah, so both databases are targeted. So, but this gives you kind of an idea of what's going on with Azure and the ability to use PowerShell to do a lot of the deployment work that you want to do. If you're really comfortable in PowerShell, this may be your preferred method of interacting with it. All right, so now if we go out to Pipeline DB, we should see that it has a start date and end date that are different, 26th and 27th, and then it will fire up and run at those time periods. All right. Let's go back to this. So we kind of walked through this. I put this in the decks so it's easy to refer to later. Basically about creating a new factory like we did, adding linked services and the data store types and so on. So look, this has a full layout. Let's see. So here's the data types that are supported for your data sets. You only have 5 or 6 data types at the moment that are supported, and it's pretty straightforward syntax. Obviously, it's reducing this down to common levels, very much like .NET, where it doesn't have all the wealth of data types a SQL Server would have. But this gives you kind of a concept of what's available to you. You also have the types of locations there, and then availability. The cadence, I took this out of Microsoft's support on this, but the cadence in which a slice of the table is produced, and that's really what it's about. It's actually producing the data set over time, and you're basically saying, hey, every 15 minutes I'm going to grab a slice of data. In the format we were using, where I actually don't have partitions, you can actually partition these and add a partition to your data sets. What that'll do is it'll actually do dynamic partitioning and pull off based on date time. So if you load up your files, for instance, on the blob in a sequential date-driven fashion, you could actually have it pull in based on month, day, year, that kind of thing, and slice will match the timing of the slice that's being executed, making this a much more predictable response. In my case, with no partition, it's basically making copies of the same slice. So I'm going to make copies of the same data in the results. So here's, let's see. So this is basically the same input JSON we looked at, and here's the output and the structures that are targeted. And how I mean, this is the basis of it. So you can see that there's a lot of pieces that aren't in my JSON to start with, and that's because they're not required to deploy, and they actually still work as expected. PowerShell scripts that are used for deployment. So Data Azure Factory Table, you can see that we have, it's basically the data set location of the JSON, the file location for the JSON file. And in my case, it's just a folder structure I knew what I was going after. This deployment will actually do the same thing as what we saw, where we copy and paste it into the actual portal, where we were able to, once we copy and paste it, we could do it that way. We can also do it with PowerShell. And obviously, right now, given the way the cadence is going on, how this thing is being released and the updates to it are, you're probably able to do more with PowerShell to start with, and they're adding it to the portal after the fact. When I demoed this initially back in January, there was no capability in the portal to do what we did today. So a lot of things are changing. It's still in preview. The policy basically says, hey, what's going to happen before it fails? You can change all those, and you can give it a retry count. So if you want to keep trying, those kind of things. We got different activities. Each activity has its own set of definition. So you're going to basically make sure you understand what the inputs and outputs are. It is a pipeline, so you do have an in and you do have an out, and it will do a result. So you just need to make sure you review the activity types for the actual definitions that are used there and what's supported. So you can deploy the pipeline also with PowerShell. So here it's new Azure Data Factory pipeline. Go out and push that one out as well. So you can same type of thing is file driven off a JSON file you create outside of the window. So once we're all deployed, as it noted here, you can see that it'll actually show how many events occurred, what's happening, and the type of data that's being moved. My current one is having some issues around reading the blob, so I don't have any recent activity showing up, but this graphic shows it. Like I said, we're still in preview, so occasionally there's things that are happening that we're not seeing everything on. So. And the pipeline diagram, we looked at that as well. Setting the active period, so here's the same syntax we had before for PowerShell, showing how to go ahead and set that period and defining the pipeline for it. We did explore the blades already, and trying to change this demo set around. I'm trying to see if there's anything we missed. Don't believe so. Monitoring, I don't think monitoring is going to be very interesting for what I'm doing at the moment. Because of the issue around my pipeline not showing up. I'll show you what I mean. In this case, you notice I have no errors, and so basically we have no errors showing up in the issues. The pipeline, though, for some reason, you'll notice here that I don't have any slices being created on my source, and I'm not entirely sure why, since I'm getting no errors at any point through this. It was working. You gotta love that when you say a demo was working before I showed up today. But if you look at the SQL DB one, this is what it should have looked like. we should have seen a pending execution on the source slices as well. So you can see here that it's actually setting up my slice time period saying, hey, we're ready to receive it when you're ready to give it to us. So as stuff would have moved through the pipeline, it would have actually, each one of these slice times would have been handled as it matching slice to when we got the data in. So that's just something to be aware of. And I think the same one here. Yeah, this won't fire off until it hits the schedule. So that was a part of the new pipeline schedule. So if you look at the diagram now, we should see both pipelines in this because it's one data factory. So it's actually pushing stuff through to the DB. I don't know if I got an auto arrange on here, but that gives you kind of an idea of what's happening and what I'm doing. We're not limited in this scenario, so if I was actually moving from the old one to the new one and I wasn't targeting the same storage, we would have been able to actually show movement between multiple pieces and put multiple steps into our process. So, all right. Go back to presentation. Common use cases. So I obviously didn't get all those on here. The log import for analysis is a pretty common one if you think about what you want to do there. Basically, any type of situation where you're plugging data through and you're dropping it into, I think the most effective use is to drop it into the blob storage and then do something with it through one of the other toolings. So whether you're assigning machine learning to it, whether you're moving it into your SQL Azure database or an on-premise database, this allows you to plug like log files and just keep pumping them into the system and letting Data Factory pick them up in a batch mode and basically process through them in whichever way makes the most sense, whether it's through copying or any other type of transforms. The support for store procedures means you could plug in the data, rip apart what you need out of the log file based on setting up the data set correctly, and then push that information into your SQL and into a store procedure and do more analysis with it. So that's some, there's a lot of opportunity here to be creative and really try to take advantage of the fact that we can use cloud storage for some of that really large stuff and continue to put data in there and then refine it through Data Factory. And you can be level 1 refinement or even completed refinement by using machine learning scoring or even dumping it into Hadoop or HD Insight for further analysis using Hive or Pig or even map, the mapping piece. So the resources that I used to looking at this was the Azure Storage Explorer. If you haven't played with that, that actually is a great way to actually look at your files. So it's easy to work through that. It's in Coplex. And of course, you can go through the different resources from Microsoft for Data Factory and PowerShell. I do encourage you, if you're going to be looking at this, you really should look at the Data Factory documentation on JSON. It's really well done. It's very clear to what pieces should go where in Data Factory. And then, because the JSON files are a huge part of what you're going to create because you can define everything in that way. And then you can follow that up with PowerShell if you want to do all this in PowerShell, or you can do this all through the new data portal as well. Questions? No, that was short. The demo is actually fairly easy to go through, so I'm curious if people have questions or where we are with that.
All right, so we still have a few people that are, quite a few people that are still on the call here. Are there any questions for Steve? There's none on the queue at the moment, but.
Steve, just one from me. You were talking about monitoring. Couldn't you use Azure Insights to monitor this?
I don't know. I haven't looked at that yet. I'm assuming you should be able to, but I haven't looked at that tie-in. So the monitoring is there. So if it's the same APIs, then yes.
Oh, cool.
It's changing. It's like any preview in Azure. If it doesn't today, it might tomorrow. So
yeah. Okay. Anyone else with questions for Steve? All right. Well, we don't seem to have any questions. Sounds like you explained it pretty well. That's pretty great.
It's an intro.
Yeah,
Yep.
It is an intro. So everyone, thank you for joining us today. We'll be back again on April 8th. I don't know what the presentation is quite yet, but the notification for that should come out in the next day or two. So thank you very much for joining us. Thank you, Steve, for your time today. And we look forward to getting back together with everyone in a couple weeks.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Everyone.